Hi friends, in this video we'll see about what we have studied in Unit 1. That is, for this I'm going to give a brief on what we have studied in Unit 1, that is jurisprudence. If you want to have a detailed note, kindly visit lawexamstudyzone.in, where you will find the detailed notes along with mock tests which will be helpful for your preparation. And we are moving on to the concept. First we'll start with jurisprudence. As we have known that jurisprudence is the word, word derived from the Latin term jurisprudentia, that is juris plus prudentia. Juris means law and prudentia means knowledge, that is knowledge of law. And as there is no commonly agreed definition for the term jurisprudence, we have to rely on the juris definition. That for this I'll be dealing with Austin definition and Salmon. What Austin said, jurisprudence is a philosophy of positive law, and Salmon says jurisprudence is the science of the first principle of civil law. So, if you want to have a detailed notes on this, definition and other various juris definition, kindly visit the Law Exam Studies, where I have given a lot of explanation and notes for Unit 1. And okay, we'll move on to natural and sources of law. What is law? As we have seen in the jurisprudence, we don't have a universally agreed definition for the term law. So what Austin said, law is a command of a sovereign. That is, law is a command given by the sovereign to its members of the society, and any disobedience which will definitely attract punishment, that is sanction. So Salmon says law is nothing but a body of principle which is recognized and applied by the state in the administration of justice. And Savigny says law is the product of the general will of the people. That is, he has given a theory called Volk's theory. Volk means people and Gaze means common. That is, law is nothing but a common will of the people. So this question was asked more than 3 times in the NET exam. And we'll move on to sources of law. Sources of law. For this we will be touching upon custom, legislation and precedent. Precedent is also known as stare decisis. So what is custom? So moving on to the custom, we'll have to see that Salmon classification on the sources of law. Salmon classified the sources of law into material and formal. Material, formal source. What is formal source? So sources from which the law derives its force and validity is a formal source. That is, it is the will of the state as manifested in the statutes or decision of the courts. And what is material source? Material source, that is sources which gives the matter or content of a principle of law, that is material source. And material source is further classified into historical source and legal source. Historical source, that is as the name itself expresses, that the history or evolution for the principle of law and the circumstances through which it attained the form of law. And legal sources which are recognized and as such by law itself, that is further divided into legislation, custom, precedent and agreement. If you see that historical source, it doesn't have a legal recognition, and whereas legal source have a legal recognition. What Hallan says about custom is nothing but a general observed course of conduct. So what are the essential requisition of a custom? It should be continuity and immemorial antiquity, reasonable, it should be certain and definite, and it should not oppose the public policy or statutory law. So what is legislation? Moving on to that, we'll see that the classification of custom. So classification of custom. Custom is classified into custom without sanction and custom with sanction. Custom with sanction is further classified into legal custom and conventional custom. Legal custom is recognized and enforced by courts, whereas conventional custom is binding between the parties to the agreement. And the legal custom is further classified into general custom and local custom. General custom, it's applicable throughout the territory, and local custom is applicable to the particular region of the country. And the essential requisition, as we have seen, that will move on to the legislations. So legislation is one of the main direct source of law. In plain term, legislation refers to the making of law. So what is the juris definition for the legislation? Salmon defines legislation as legislation is that source of law which consists in the declaration of legal rules by a competent authority. And Austin says there can be no law without a legislative act. So we'll move on to the precedent. Precedent is otherwise known as stare decisis. So Article 141 of Indian Constitution says that law declared by the Supreme Court shall be binding on all court within the territory of India. So President is nothing but past guidance for the future case, where you will came across other concept called obiter dicta, that is, obiter dicta is observation made by the judge, but which are not essential for the decision reached. So usually obiter dicta is not binding and precedent is only binding. And in this you will come across a question that is that the Supreme Court is binding on its own decision. This question was solved in the case Bengal Immunity Company versus State of Bihar, whereas the court observed that there is nothing in Indian Constitution which prevents the Supreme Court from departing from its previous decision if it is convinced of its error or its banful effect on the general interest of public. So it is clear that Supreme Court is not binding on its own decision. Only the lower court to the Supreme Court is binding on the decision given by the Supreme Court, isn't it? Okay. So what Gray is opinion on precedent? Gray said that precedent covers everything said or done and which furnish the rule for a subsequent practice. So precedent is also known as statistics. If you get any question in statistics, you have to answer from precedent. Is it okay? Then we'll move on to the schools of jurisprudence. Schools of jurisprudence, that is natural law school, and we'll see the school one by one. So first we'll start with natural law school. And natural law, the main supporters of these schools are Aristotle, Cicero, Grotius. And in this school is mainly based on that the law are inherent in nature, inherent nature of man, and is independent of any other institution and are common to all societies, which is mainly based on the principle that natural law proposes that law are logical progression from morals. Therefore, actions that are considered to be morally wrong will be against the law. So, and we'll move on to the next school, analytical school. Analytical school is also known as positive school, imperative school. The main proponent of this theory is Austin. So the main supporters were Austin, Bentham, Gray. This school is based on the principle that law as it is and not law as it ought to be. For this principle is like it separated the law from all other external influences, and which is called pure theory, which was proponed by Kelsen. So which is law as it is and not law as it to be, and it is law is a command of sovereign. This school is mainly based on the law as a command of sovereign, as we have seen in the definition given by the Austin. Definition of law given by the Austin, that is law is a command of sovereign. It is emphasized on the legislation as the source of law. And the other school, moving on to the other school, that is historical school. The main proponents of the main supporters of this theory are Pucha, Savigny, Maine. This school is mainly based on that law is the product of the forces and influences of the past. So law is, what we have seen in that Savigny definition, that law is the common will of the people. So law is the product of the general process. In this sense, it is a dynamic organ which changes and develops according to the suitable circumstances on the society. So if the society changes, that the people changes, there will be change. So to keep pace with that, law has to change. So law is based on the common will of the people. If the common will of the people changes, then law has to change. Then sociological school. Sociology's main supporters were Comte, Duke, Ulrich, Montesquieu, Eyre. So this school is mainly based on that law as an instrument of social progress to establish a relationship between the law and society. That is the main principle based. This school is mainly based on the principle that law do not come from the state but from the society. Any time, it said that at present or at any time the center of gravity lies not in legislation, not in juristic decision, but by the society itself. So we'll move on to the next concept, law and morality. Law and morality. As we have known that law is an enactment made by state, whereas morality is nothing but which is considered to be right or wrong in the society. So both these concepts are regulating the human conduct. Even though the motive is same, but there are many differences between these two. For example, law is a set of rules and regulations that are punishable by the court if violated. Whereas morality is what is considered to be right or wrong in the society. And law regulates the conduct of external conduct of human. Whereas morality regulates both the internal and external conduct of human. So breach of law is leads to physical punishment. There is no physical punishment in morality and doesn't change from man to man. It is universal in particular society. It changes. On the other hand, morality changes from man to man. If one thing is right to me, it is not right for another person. One thing is wrong to me, it is not wrong for me. So whereas in the case of law, it is not. It is particular in a society. Or it doesn't change from man to man. So the other differences are it enforced by way of external profession. No external profession in case of morality. It is only a free will of an individual. So what Roscoe Pound stated that the differences in the application of law and morality as to application of moral and legal perspective respectively, it is said that moral principles are of individual and relative application. They must be implemented in reference to situation and individual, whereas legal rules are of general and absolute application. So what he said that when it comes to morality, it depends. Application of morality, it based on the situation and individual, but it is not in the case of law because it is general and absolute application. So relationship between law and morality, as we have seen the difference, we'll see that relationship between law and morality. Both regulate the conduct of individual in society. The duty of the state is to formulate a law which elevate the moral standard of the people. Obedience to law depends upon the active support of the moral sentiment of the people. In line with Green, in attempting to enforce an unpopular law, a government may be doing more harm than good by creating and spreading the habit of disobedience to law. The total cost of such an attempt may well be greater than the social gain. So we'll move on to the other concept called concept of rights and duties. What is rights? We know there are many kinds of rights like legal rights, constitutional rights, fundamental rights. Many rights are there, but what is rights? Yeah, rights is nothing but interest recognized and protected by law. What Salman defines rights as an interest recognized and protected by a rule. Ireland defines that rights as a legally protected interest. So we'll know what we have idea on what is rights, isn't it? So we'll move on to the characteristics of legal rights. What are the characteristics? There should be subject of the right, the person of incidence, there should be object of the right, and content of the right, and title to the right. So what is subject of the right? We'll see it one by one by giving an example given by Salman. So what is that example? A buys a piece of land from B. So here the subject of the right is A. And what is the person of incidence? That, for example, if one person is having a right, then it is duty of another. It imposes duty to another. For example, if I am having a right to life, then it is a duty of other person not to harm me, isn't it? So here the right, the person of incidence is against all the wealth. So if A buys a piece of land from B, A is having a right over the land. So here the duty of other person not to interfere with the enjoyment of his land. So here this duty lies to old world. So what is the object here? Object here is the land. And what is the content? The content of the right is, as we have known, that non-interference. And title. What is the title? Obviously it's a conveyance. That is, a conveyance is nothing but by which it was acquired from its former owner. And we'll move on to the theories of rights. There are two theories of rights, that is will theory and interest theory. What is will theory? Will theory is we'll see the main supporters of this theory and we'll see the brief of each theory. So the main supporters were Hegel, Hume, Kant. So in interest theory it's Eyring. So what is will theory? Will theory is in case of will theory, the holder having control over another duty. But in interest theory, owner has a right, not because owner have choice, but because the ownership makes owners better off. For example, if A is having, for example, as we have seen in that example, A buys a piece of land from B. So in that example, A is having a right over his land, and it is the duty of other not to interfere with the A land. So here the A is having a choice over the duty, he is having a control over the duty of another person by way of allowing him or to restrain him to entering into his land. So A is having a control over the duty of another person. So here in the case of interest theory, it is not like will theory. For example, if A is having a right to vote, then it is duty of the state to facilitate all necessary things to exercise his right. So here he is not having having a control or choice. Is like owner has a right, not because owners have choice, but because the ownership makes the owners better off. I mean, this example makes you understand what is will and interest theory, and we'll move on to the kinds of rights. So there are 5 kinds of rights. One is positive and negative rights, real and personal rights, right in rem and right in personam, proprietary and proprietary and personal rights, and inheritable and uninheritable rights. So what is we'll see one by one. What is positive right? Positive right is something like to do something, and negative right is not to do something. For example, a positive right is a right, a duty of one person to do something for another person. A negative right, yeah, and the other hand, negative right. Negative right is not to do something. That is, it is the duty of one individual not to do some acts in order to secure right of another individual. And we'll see that right in rem and right in personam. Right in rem, it is a right, one's right against society at large, and right in personam, it is one's right against particular person. For example, as we have seen in that example, that A buys a piece of land from B, there A as A as right, and it is duty of others not to interfere, where the person of incident is society attached. As we have seen in that, the person of incident is against all against all person in the world, isn't it? So here the right in rem is the one's right against society at large. Whereas right in personam, it is like a particular person, one's right against particular person. For example, if A and B is entering into one contract, if one party fails, and it is then other party is having a right over that party. That person. If A fails, then B is having a right over A, isn't it? So here the right is against particular person, not in society at large, as in the case of right in rem. So as I hope that you have a clear understanding on what is right in what is right in rem and what is right in personam. So these questions were asked so many times in the net exam. So we'll move on to the next types, like proprietary right and personal right. So if any right is connected to the property, that is proprietary right, and if any right is not connected to will, then it is personal right. And what is a real right and personal right? Real right is something like right corresponds to a duty imposed upon persons in general, and personal right, as we have seen, that it is against particular persons. So inheritable and uninheritable. What is inheritable and uninheritable? Inheritable is like if it dies, if it dies with person, then it is uninheritable. If it is not dies with the owner of the right, it is inheritable. To make it clear, for example, succession is a right. It is a kind of right that is inheritable. The right of the person not dies with the owner, it passes to another person. If that owner of the right dies, the right passes to another person. That is, if A is having a right over his property, even in the case of his death, his right will pass to his legal heirs, isn't it? So here inheritable right is it doesn't dies with the person, owner of the right. So uninheritable rights, if any right which is not inheritable, that it is not passing to another person. For example, personal right. If A is having a right to speech, if the A dies, it will not pass to another person, isn't it? Because they are having their own personal rights. So another types, apart from these 5 kinds of rights, there are some other kinds of rights. We'll see it one by one. That's perfect right, imperfect right. These questions were asked in this concept, like perfect and imperfect right. So what is perfect right? As the name itself indicates, perfect, it is protected and recognized by law. For example, debt recovery. And what is imperfect right? Imperfect right, which are rights which are neither recognized nor protected by law. For example, time barred debt recovery. So public right and private right. Public right, those vested in the state is said to be public right, and right connected with private individual. For example, as we have seen in the breach of contract, that is personal right, vested and contingent right. What is vested and contingent? This was also asked in NET exam. Vested right, right which is vested on the person from the very beginning is called vested interest. Contingent interest, what is contingent? It depends on some conditions, I mean happening or non-happening of certain acts. For example, A agrees to transfer his house to B on his, to B after his death. So here B is having a contingent right over the house until A's death. So here the right of the house, A's right over the house depends on happening of A's death, isn't it? So contingent right is nothing but it is determines, conferred on the happening or non-happening of certain acts or events. So we'll move on to the next concept, duty. Duty is, as we have known, duty is an obligatory act. It obligates the person to perform certain acts or to refrain from certain acts for the sake of others, as we have seen in the concept of rights. So what Salman says on duty. So duty is an obligatory act. It is an opposite of which would be wrong. Duties and wrongs are correlatives. And what is duty? We know the concept of duty. So what is the classification of duties? There are certain classifications, that is moral and legal duty, positive and negative duty, primary and second sanctioning duty, absolute and relative duty. What is moral and legal duty? Moral duty is an opposite of moral wrong, but it is not recognized by law. It is followed out of human conscience and social perception, while a legal duty is an act, the opposite of which is a legal wrong. It is an act recognized as a duty by law and treated as such for the administration of justice. Positive and negative duty, as we have seen in the positive and negative rights, when a person is enforced to perform a duty, then it is called a positive duty. On the other hand, when the law asks the person to do something, it is a positive duty. Not to do something, then it is a negative duty. Primary and sanctioning duty. What is primary? Primary duty is one which exists per se and is independent of any other duty. And secondary duty is just no independent existence of other duties. And absolute and relative duty. Austin classified duties into absolute and relative. Absolute duties are those do not have any corresponding rights, and relative duties are those for which there is corresponding rights. As we have seen in that concept of right, every right, if one person is having a right, then it is duty of another person. For right and duties are correlatives. Here, absolute duty talks about that duties are those do not have any corresponding rights. So what it can be? So Austin classified the absolute duty into four types, namely duty to those who are not human beings, such as duty towards God. There is no right of, as we have seen that concept of right, one person right is duty of another person. Here the man is performing his duty towards God, where God has no right, isn't it, in a practical sense? Duty towards indeterminate person or public at large. And third one, duty towards state or sovereign. Fourth one, self-regarding duty, such as duty not to commit suicide or duty not to become intoxicated. So we'll move on to the another concept, legal personality. Another concept, legal personality. Legal personality. Salman says, so far as the legal theory is concerned, a person is any being whom the law regards as capable of rights and duties. So person includes both natural and artificial person. So now what is natural and artificial person? We'll see it one by one. So under the Indian, as we have seen, if we see the Indian Penal Code section 11, it says person includes any company or association or body of person, whether incorporated or not. So natural persons are human beings, whereas legal persons are who may be real, in whom law vests rights and duties and thus attributes personality by way of fiction. So in other words, a legal person has a real existence, but in personality is fictitious, because such a thing does not exist in fact, but which is deemed to exist in the eye of law. Example, company. So for artificial person, for as we are saying legal person, so another term for legal person we will use interchangeably that artificial person. So example company, as we have seen that example company. So for artificial person, two things have to be needed, that is corpus and animus. Corpus is nothing but the body into which the law infuses, and animus on the other hand, animus is like personality or the will of the person. There are certain theories for the legal personality, so they are. So we'll see it one by one. First, fiction theory. Fiction theory is expounded mainly by Savigny, Salmon, Kelsen, and Hallan. The personality of a corporation is different from of its member. So this theory is mainly based on the legal person is created only in the eyes of law for a specific purpose. So any change in the membership does not affect the existence of the corporation. A corporation is clothed with legal personality. The law may lift the veil whenever required. That is the lifting of corporate veil. So another theory is concession theory. This theory is mainly focused on. This theory is similar to fiction theory, but it focuses only on the sources from which the legal power of the corporation is derived. So it is concerned with the sovereignty of a state. The jurisdiction person is merely a concession or a creation of the state. To validate or recognize any personality, recognition of law is must. So this theory is based on the sources from which the legal power of the corporation is derived. On other hand, in other words, to validate or recognize any personality, recognition of law is must. Then group personality theory. This theory was propounded by Althusius. This theory believes that every collective group has a real mind, a real will, and real power of action. So a corporation has a real existence irrespective of fact whether it is recognized or not recognized. So by state. So and what says that the law has no power to create an entity but merely has the right to recognize or not to recognize an entity. So this theory is mainly based on the principle that corporation has a real existence irrespective of the fact whether it is recognized or not recognized by the state. So then next theory is bracket theory. Bracket theory was also asked two to three times in NET exam. So this theory was propounded by Eyring. According to this theory, juristic personality is only a symbol to facilitate the working of the corporation bodies. So only the members of the only the members of the corporation are persons in real sense, and in and a bracket is put around them. So yeah, so and a bracket is put around them to indicate that they are to be treated as one single unit when they form themselves into a corporation. So an important implication of theory is that law can remove the bracket at any time and look beyond the entity to discover the real state of affairs. That is, as we have said before, lifting of corporate veil. So another theory is purpose theory. This theory expounded by Emmanuel and many other jurists. So this theory states that human beings are only the subject to legal rights, not companies. So juristic person is no person at all, but merely a subjectless property destined for a particular purpose. There is a ownership but no owner. And if we see that legal personality, we have to see one another concept called legal status of unborn person. So a child in mother's womb is by legal fiction regarded as already born. If he is born alive, he will have a legal status. Though section 13 of TP Act, a property can be transferred for the benefit of an unborn person by way of trust, and also in sections 114 of Subsection Act 1925 provides for the creation of prior interest before unborn person be made by owner of property, but no property will be deemed to be vested in the unborn person unless and until he is born alive. So the person in the mother's womb is also considered to be legal person. So we'll move on to the next concept of property. Law normally takes cognizance of living human beings, yet the law makes an exception in case of an infant. So as we have seen in that section 13 of TP Act, a property can be transferred for the benefit of an unborn person by way of trust, and also in sections 114 of Subsection Act 1925 provides for the creation of prior interest before unborn person be made by owner of property, but no property will be deemed to be vested in the unborn person unless and until he is born alive. So the person in the mother's womb is also considered to be legal person. So we'll move on to the next concept of property. what is property? Section 2C of Benami Transaction Act defines property as property means property of any kind, whether movable or immovable, tangible or intangible, includes any right or interest in such property. And we'll see the theory of property, because this will be asked. This was asked so many times in NET exam, so we can expect questions from these theories. So we'll see it one by one. First, functional theory. Functional theory supporters are Lasky, and this theory is mainly based on the principle that this theory treats property as not only as an individual right but as a social institution. In what this theory says that use of property should go along with two main things, namely rule of reasons and welfare of the society. According to Lasky, property is a social fact like any other, and it is the characters of social facts to keep on changing. Property therefore has assumed various aspects and is further liable to changes with the changing norms of the society. Historical theory. Historical theory main supporters were Roscoe Pound and Henry Maine. According to this theory, there was no individual property in earlier stage but only collective property. So there is no concept of individual property, only the collective property. Henry Maine earlier said that earlier property belonged only to large society composed of patriarchal pattern, and the concept of individual property came into play after the disintegration of collective property. So there is only a concept called collective property, no individual property. And this theory also discusses that the concept of property came from the human desire to possess and control over things, which developed the concept of possession later, and the concept of possession later gives rise to the concept of ownership, which developed to the owner of the property enjoy and control over the property owned by him through law. And another theory called psychological theory, which was the main supporter of Bentham. This theory argues that it is a natural instinct of a person to control and possess over things, which gradually gives rise to a concept of property. That is, property came into existence on account of the acquisitive tendency of human beings. And property is the creation. Another theory is called property is the creation of the state. The supporters were Jennings and Rousseau. According to this theory, origin of property can be traced back to origin of law and state. State provides the rights towards property by protecting and enforcing those rights. So what Jennings said, property and law bond together and die together. Natural law theory. Another theory is natural law theory. The main supporters were Grotius Blackstone. According to his theory, property was ownerless earlier, and whoever occupied them first became the owner of property. According to his theory, there is no owner. Earlier, there is no owner for the property, and one who acquire and possess it, he will be the owner of the property. So what Grotius said, all things originally were without an owner, and whomsoever captured them or occupied them became their owners. And another theory is called labor or positive theory. The main supporters were Spencer. According to labor theory, property is the outcome of labor. This theory is also called as positive theory, which was developed by Spencer, who based it on the fundamental law of equal freedom of individual. In line with Spencer, property is the outcome of individual labor. No one has a moral right towards the property which he has not acquired through his personal labor. So, kind of property. What are the kinds of property? The corporal and, as we have seen, corporal and incorporeal. So, what is corporal? Corporal is nothing but right over material or tangible things. So, incorporeal property, also known as conventional or intellectual property, which includes all those valuable interests which are protected by law, for example, patent right. Then move on to the next concept, ownership and possession. So we'll see what is ownership. What Askin said, ownership means a right which avails against everyone who is subject to the law, conferring the right to put things to user of indefinite nature. So Askin focused on three things, namely indefinite use, unrestricted disposition, and unlimited duration. So what Holland says, ownership as a plenary control over an object. So Holland focused on possession, enjoyment, and ownership. What Hibbert said that ownership includes using of things, excluding others from using it, and disposing of the things and destroying the things. What Salmon says, ownership in its most comprehensive signification denotes the relationship between a person and right that is vested in him. And ownership should have the following requisition, that is right of possession, right of enjoyment, and right to consumption, alienation and destruction, indeterminate duration, and residuary nature. So what is the mode of acquisition of ownership? There are two types: by operation of law and by reason of some act or event. In modern times, the mode of acquisition of ownership is original and derivative. So original further classified into absolute, accessory, and extinctive. What is absolute mode of acquisition? That acquiring a thing which has no owner, that is acquiring the ownerless property, that is res nullis, and that is absolute. And what is accessory? When ownership is acquired through accession, that is addition of value of property through labor or new material. And extinctive, when a person by some act on his part extinguishes the ownership of the previous owner and acquires its ownership himself. For example, prescription, that is if a person is if a person is availing the right over the particular thing for over a period of 20 years or more, it belongs to that person. So that is called prescription. So absolute, accessory, and extinctive. Accessory, absolute is nothing but acquiring the ownerless property, and accessory is nothing but giving extra effect, that is through accession, that is addition of value of property through labor or new material. And extinctive is like example, prescription. And derivative, we have seen that original modes of acquisition of ownership, then we'll see the derivative. What is derivative? A person is said to acquire derivative when he accepts the conveyance of title from previous owner. This type of mode may include that acquisition of ownership by inheritance or intestate, etc. So different kinds of ownership. What is different kinds? So corporal and incorporeal, sole ownership and co-ownership, trust and beneficial, vested and contingent, legal and equitable. Corporal and incorporeal. So corporal, as we have seen, it is ownership over material things. Incorporeal, ownership over the rights. For example, patent right. For example of corporal, house. It is an object over a material thing. So sole ownership vested in a single person, that is person owns. If a person owns a house, it is a sole ownership. Co-ownership, that is ownership vested with two or more person, members of, for example, members of the partnership firm. The members of the partnership firm is said to be the co-ownership. And trust, a person is holding the property with an obligation to use it for the benefit of another person, that is called trust. For example, trustee holding the property to safeguard the interest of unborn person, as we have seen in the legal status of unborn person. So if one person is holding the property for the benefit of the unborn person, that is, it is an example. Trust is nothing but a person is holding the property for benefit of the another person with an obligation to use it for the benefit of another person. Beneficial ownership. What is beneficial ownership? Beneficial ownership is nothing but a person is holding the property with an obligation to use it for the benefit of some other person. And if for example, A is holding a property for the with an obligation to use it for the benefit of unborn person. Here A is having a trust ownership, and the unborn person is having a beneficial ownership. So what is absolute and limited ownership? Absolute is nothing but all rights of ownership without a restriction. So for example, A can sell, transfer, mortgage, possess, or enjoy itself, that is absolute ownership. Restricted, limited, the owner enjoys the right to use and enjoy the property or enjoy the property or a limited period of time, as long as some other person is alive. For example, A can possess the house without the right to alienate it, that is called limited ownership. And another one is contingent and vested, as we have seen in that contingent and vested right. Contingent is depends upon the happening and non-happening of certain acts, and for example, ownership depends on the happening of certain events, that is A agrees to give his watch to B when he passed the exam. So here B has contingent ownership over the watch until he passed the exam. So vested ownership is absolute, not depending upon future. For example, so from the above example, B has vested ownership over the watch after he passed the exam, after he secured the pass mark in the exam. So legal and equitable ownership by common law, that is right in rem. So ownership by rule of equity, that is right in personam. And we'll move on to the another concept, possession. Possession, what is possession? In Palak said having physical control over a thing constitutes possession. So in view of Salmon, the possession of a material object is the continuing exercise of a claim to the exclusive use of it. And possession needs two things, namely claim of exclusive user and conscious or actual exercise of the claim, that is for example animus and corpus. The two things are animus and corpus. Animus is claim of exclusive user, and corpus is physical control over it. So according to Savigny, intention coupled with physical power to exclude others from the use of material object. So what are the essential requisition of possession? There are two things which are said to be important for possession, that is corpus and animus. Animus possidendi, that is a mental element which consists under determination to exercise the control, that is intention to possess, that is animus possidendi. And corpus possession, physical element which consists in physical control over thing, that is a person who has intention to possess actually possessed it, that is. Then possession in fact and possession in law. Possession in fact means the relationship between a person and a thing which he possesses is called possession. Possession in fact or de facto possession. And possession in law, possession which is recognized and protected by law, is also called as de jure recognition. De facto possession and de jure possession. De facto possession is possession in fact, and de jure possession is possession in law. A person who is in de facto possession can also be a person who is in de jure possession. So there can be three situations may arise, which is possession in fact as well as in law, possession in fact not in law, that is custody. For example, a tailor having the cloth of A is a possession in fact but not in law. Possession in law and not in fact, that is constructive possession. It is A having the receipt for his upcoming delivery of good, that is he is having a constructive possession, that is possession in law but not in fact. He is not, in fact is not having a possession unless and until he receives the goods. So kinds of possession: corporal, incorporeal, mediate, immediate, constructive, and adverse, de jure, de facto. What is corporal possession? Possession over material things, that is house. So incorporeal, possession over immaterial things, that is a patent right. So mediate possession held by one man through another person. For example, possession acquired through agent. If A buys a book through his agent B, A has mediate possession until the agent delivers the book to B. I hope you understand the concept. That is, mediate possession is possession held by one man through another, and immediate possession is acquired directly. For example, A buys a book without any agent, then A is having an immediate possession over the book. If he buys a book with agent, then what happens? A is having a mediate possession unless and until agent delivers the book. So adverse, constructive possession. It is a possession in law and not in possession in fact. For example, A bought a house from B. B delivers the key of house to A. Here A has a constructive possession of house until he gets into the house. So he is having only the key, not he is having a possession in law, so not in fact. So adverse possession, the possession of one person against that of another person. For example, A holding the land on behalf of B. If one person is holding something on behalf of someone, then it is called adverse possession. De jure possession. De jure possession is possession in law, and de facto possession is possession in fact, and acquisition of possession. So what are the modes of acquisition? By taking, by delivery, or by operation of law. By taking further classified into original and destructive. What is taking? Taking the possession without the consent of owner. It may be either rightful or wrongful, which depends upon the circumstances. So it classified into original and derivative. Original, taking possession of a thing which is rationalist. What is rationalist? A thing which is an ownerless. So that is called rationalist, that is without any previous owner, as we have seen in ownership. So if a person taking possession of a thing which is rationalist, then it is the original. Taking possession of a thing without the consent of his owner, then it is derivative, destructive. So taking modes of acquisition of possession is one of the mode of acquisition of possession is taking. So taking further classified into original and destructive. Original is taking a possession of res nullis, and destructive is taking a possession without the consent of its owner. So another type is delivery. So delivery is nothing but a thing is acquired with the consent of its owner. It further classified into actual and constructive. Actual is delivery of immediate possession, and constructive is delivery of mediate possession. It further classified into surrender of, three types. One is surrender of mediate possession, and transfer of mediate possession, and transfer of mediate possession while immediate possession is in the hands of a third person. For example, surrender of mediate possession. These are a little. These can be discussed in detail in some other video. So if you want to have a detailed notes, please, and as I said before, kindly visit the lawexamstudiezone.in to have a details. I have put examples to get a clear understanding. Then we will move on to the third type of acquisition of possession, that is operation of law. That is acquisition of possession by ownership by operation of law, that is prescription. So if A dies, then his property will be transferred to his successor. Another example is succession. So if A dies, then his property will be transferred into his legal as a successor. The successor got possession of the property after the death of A by law. So it is operation of law, and we'll see differences between ownership and possession. So ownership and possession, what may be the difference? One is, it is the absolute right over property. Ownership is absolute right, and whereas possession is physical control over property. Ownership is de jure and possession is de facto. Ownership is the transfer of ownership is a technical process which involves conveyance, and in possession, transfer of possession is less technical when compared to ownership. And ownership includes possession, but possession not includes ownership. And guarantee of law in the case of ownership, and guarantee of fact in the case of possession. And it is a relationship between a person and any right that is vested in him. And in case of possession, it is the external relationship of ownership.